Hello Year 10, welcome to this week's Power and Conflict lesson. Today we're going to look at the poem Tissue. It is the poem that English teachers often leave till the end because some of the ideas in this poem are quite complex, but don't worry, by the end of this video you will feel quite confident, I think, with this poem. So what you do need is your anthology. If you don't have your anthology, then just pause the video because I have put a copy of the poem on Show My Homework. You'll need a pen, you'll need a highlighter, you'll need something to make notes in, either your English book or paper, whatever you're using, and we'll be ready to start. Okay, so the poem is called Tissue by Imtiaz Darka, and I just want to start by asking you, what is fragility? So, what does it mean? So which word does it come from? So the adjective form of this is fragile, when you call something fragile. Now, if you're calling something fragile, what are you saying about it? You're kind of saying that it's delicate, aren't you? And, easy to damage, easy to break, that kind of thing. So fragility is just the noun form of fragile. So I kind of want you to think about what sort of things are fragile in life, and that's a sort of running theme throughout this poem. Okay, so let's think about paper, because the title of the poem is Tissue, and paper is a type of tissue. So let's think, how many different things do we use paper in an average day? And then I want you to think of, what other uses do we have for paper, and sort of think about the importance of paper really in our world. So you can pause the video, you can pop your list on your paper, and then come back and see if you got the same sort of things as me. Okay, hopefully you made your list. So did you think of some of these things? I hope you did. So obviously, I'm sure you'd have come up with things like taking notes, writing things down, maybe even wrapping things, wrapping presents and things like that. But did you think of maps and, how paper is used to map out geography? You've got here an architect's plan here, so it maps up plans for houses and buildings. Of course, money, really important. We need money to survive. So that's another really important use of money, of paper. And birth certificate. I remember actually losing my birth certificate just before I wanted to do my teacher training course, and it was an absolute nightmare. I had to jump through lots of hoops to get a replacement birth certificate, and actually when I lost my birth certificate, I lost quite a few other documents, like my GCSE documents and things like that. So it's a nightmare if you lose all of those things, so just look after them. Pieces of paper, yes, but very important. They're documenting our lives, aren't they? What about things like the Holy Bible or the Quran or other religious books? Again, very important, essential to many people's lives. And then we've got things like receipts here as well. Hopefully you came up with some of those. So when we think about all the different uses of paper, what do you think paper symbolises? I mean, I've got some ideas myself. I just want you to have a little think. For us, for humans, what does paper perhaps symbolise in our lives? What could it be symbolic of? Okay, just keep thinking about that as we go through the poem. Okay, here's the woman herself. Imtiaz Darka. She was born in Pakistan, raised in Glasgow, and now lives in Britain and India. So Tissue, the poem, is from her 2006 collection called The Terrorist at My Table. The collection questions how well we know the people around us. She has written 5 collections of poetry and often deals with themes of identity, role of women in contemporary society, and the search for meaning. Okay, so we know this idea of themes of identity, the role of women, search for meaning. Okay, so we're going to launch in and we're just going to read the poem straight away at the beginning. Okay, and as we are reading, you can write down some questions that you might have for me, and then you can email them to me and I'll try and answer them for you if I haven't answered them by the end of this video. Okay. Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper thinned by age or touching. The kind you find in well-used books. The back of the Quran where a hand has written in the names and histories. Who was born to whom, the height and weight, who died, where and how, on which sepia date, pages smoothed and stroked and turned, transparent with attention. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. See how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. Maps too. The sun shines through their borderlines, the marks that rivers make, roads, rail tracks, mountain folds. Fine slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. An architect could use all this, place layer over layer, luminous script over numbers over line, and never wish to build again with brick or block, but let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride can make. Find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue, raise a structure never meant to last, of paper smoothed and stroked and thinned to be transparent, turned into your skin. Okay, so I hope you've picked up some ideas of what she might be talking about in this poem. But I think you need to kind of have a second look at this. And so I'm going to play this video to you now, and all the words of the poem come up. But you've got the poem in front of you. What I would like you to do is, as you are looking at these words coming up, I want you to look at your anthology or copy of the poem and look for words and highlight them that relate to power and fragility. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. Fragility, power, two opposite themes. Okay, so that's what you're looking for in this. So I just want you to highlight when you see anything that suggests fragility or suggests power. Okay, so I shall remove my face from here. There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, and I shall play this for you. again. Okay, so hopefully what you can see on your poem is an equal number of highlights for power and fragility, and you'll see why as we go through the poem in a little bit more detail. Okay, let me bring my PowerPoint on. Here we go. So before we try and work out what tissue is all about, let's go straight to the poet herself, okay, because she's alive, and somebody tweeted her last summer before the exams, and said to her, please, 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 I have my literature exam tomorrow. I'm so worried that tissue's going to come up. Can you tell me what it's about? Because I don't get it. And she answered the student on Twitter, and here is what she said. She said, follow 3 sets of images. Number 1, fragile tissue, human skin, set against number 2, rigid structures, social, religious, national, that can cause conflict, and 3, light that breaks through. The poem explores how we might avoid conflict by valuing things that tell the real story of our lives. Okay, so we've got 3 things going on in the poem. One is about the fragility of human skin and tissue. The second one is about the rigid nature of structures, and she talks about maybe buildings, but also here she's talking about social structures, religious structures, national structures, and these things can cause conflict. And then the third thing she's talking about is that the light can come through, and that actually we should be considering what we really value in our lives. Okay, so keep that in your mind, because that's what Imtiaz Darka herself is saying. So finally, we actually have the writer to tell us. You know, you lot are always asking me, is this really what the writer meant? Well, yeah, here we go. We've got it straight from the horse's mouth. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through and try and help you sum up what messages she's giving us in sections of the poem. So let's just start with the first 3 stanzas. We've got paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper thinned by age or touching. The kind you find in well-used books, the back of the Quran where a hand has written in the names and histories, who was born to whom, the height and weight, who died, where and how, on which sepia date, pages smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. A couple of things to kind of pick out from here, I suppose, is this idea of things can change, it can alter, it can change. Also, we've got the sort of reference to religion here, and we've got this idea of history. We've got this, you know, factual information, but then we've got the sepia date, and you'll know, you know, from photography, sepia is that browny colour, which is the colour that when photography first started is the colour of the photograph. So it's sort of emphasising the historical nature. So the first few quatrains, so I've just highlighted words that I think are really important for you to know about poetry. Quatrains is another word for stanza, but it's a stanza in particular that has how many lines? Yes, 4. So a quatrain has 4 lines. So, you know, you're going to be helping yourself to get more marks by using proper terminology if you say quatrains instead of stanza in the exam. Okay, so the first few quatrains create a sense of the power of something fragile like paper. The first way in which she makes paper seem important is its use in books and religion. The second way that a paper product becomes important is when a family history is recorded on it, births, lives, deaths, etc. So it's this idea that paper itself, it's so thin and it's so easy to tear and to screw up, but it is actually incredibly powerful. And so remember, this is about power and conflict, this anthology. So it is incredibly powerful, even though it's so fragile and so easy to break. So something that is fragile can still be powerful. And when we think about the last poem that we looked at was Ozymandias, it's this idea that he was powerful, and to exert his power and to show his power, he had this very solid statue built with, my name is Ozymandias on the bottom. And, that in a sense was how we wanted to show power as humans. But actually what she's saying here is, interestingly, something as fragile as paper is actually incredibly powerful. You have religion scripture written in paper. You have births and deaths written in paper. You have dates and important information like heights and weights and that kind of stuff. And we see that it's smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. We know it's important because we touch it a lot. That paper that gets very almost transparent, when you see books in museums where it's been touched a lot, it's, very delicate. So the first few quatrains are about this incredibly fragile structure such as tissue, paper, being incredibly powerful, giving us a different view of power. And then we get to the next three quatrains. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift, see how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. Maps too. The sun shines through their borderlines, the marks that rivers make, roads, rail tracks, mountain folds. Fine slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. So I suppose a couple of things to notice here. We've got the idea of buildings now, and she's considering, what would it be like if solid buildings are made out of paper, and they might drift, they might shift in the direction of the wind. And then we've got maps as well, and the sun might shine through the map and shine through all the borders of where all the different countries are or different counties are or something like that. And then we've obviously then got this idea of the grocery shop, and we're being given this piece of paper, the receipt, which is telling us what we paid. And I love this line here where she says, might fly our lives like paper kites. This idea that, these receipts are like kites that we are grabbing hold of and they're dragging us around. And there's a real message there about money and material things. And I want you to think about that. Okay, so the second few verses create a sense of the apparent weakness of paper. Paper may be seen as unsuitable for building anything substantial in the real world. Maps and receipts are part of the geopolitics, and geopolitics is just politics influenced by geography. So I suppose you could think about countries where they're having wars over their borders and things like that. That would be geopolitics. And economics of public life, recording human existence in fragile materials vulnerable to sun and wind. So whereas the first few quatrains talked about this incredibly fragile tissue as being incredibly powerful, now the next three quatrains are talking about its vulnerabilities, and how actually it would be unsuitable for making a building because it would just shift and fall away on a sigh. And maps, it would shine a light through the map and you wouldn't be able to see the borderlines properly, so actually it wouldn't be quite so powerful for certain things, and it's unsuitable for certain things. Okay, and then we get the next three quatrains, and then we have a final stanza that is just one line. An architect could use all this, place layer over layer, luminous script over numbers, over line, and never wish to build again with brick or block, but let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride can make, find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue, raise a structure never meant to last of paper, smoothed and stroked and thinned to be transparent, turned into your skin. Okay, so here, I suppose a couple of things. We've got the image of the architect, layer overlay of luminous script. So, you know, architects have a special desk that has a light on it, so they can put kind of tracing paper over the sort of the map of the house, the floor plan, that's what I was trying to think about, the floor plan of the house, and so they can kind of, you know, trace over it and they can make changes. So that's the idea of the luminous script over numbers and lines, and let the day break in through capitals and monoliths. Monoliths are single structures. Could be a massive rock. It could be a big statue. Ozymandias. And so she's saying here, let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride can make. We can make a real link here to Ozymandias, can't we? This idea that his pride in himself, his pride made him build this big structure to say, look at how powerful I am. And actually what she's saying here is let the daylight break through these shapes that pride can make. So it's a kind of similar message, I think, to what Shelley was communicating to us with Ozymandias. Find a way to trace the grand design with living tissue. Okay, so why are you using paper to make your maps, Mr. Architect? Why aren't you using living tissue? Why aren't you building with living tissue? Living tissue is us, isn't it? It's our skin. Raise a structure never meant to last. Well, if there's one sure thing about us and humans, the one thing that we know about is that one day we will die, and so therefore we are never meant to last. So maybe she's referring to us. Of paper smoothed and stroked and thin to be transparent, turned into your skin. So weighing up the fragility and the substance, the writer sees a living power in something as delicate as skin. From thin paper, mighty forms can grow. It is the tissue which a thinker can draw up plans like an architect to trace a grand design and build a structure never meant to last. Okay. So I'm not going to go through every little thing about the poem, okay, because I think it's something that you can do when you finish watching this video. And on here you will see, and this slide will be on, these slides will be on Show My Homework. On here you will see that there are a couple of questions that I want you to think about yourself, okay? Now I will be revisiting this, so I will go over these with you, but you do need to have a go and think about them yourselves. Now remember what I said last video, the examiner wants your response to the poem. The examiner wants your ideas. If you are just listening to my ideas and not coming up with any of your own, you're not having that personal response to the poem. And there are many ways of analysing a poem, and I don't want to enforce the way that I analyse it onto you. Okay, now I'm happy to give you some ideas, and what we'll do is I will go through and give you a few ideas. So you've got a couple of pointers here that I want you to look at, but the one we're going to discuss is what are the connotations of light. So think about light and dark, and then think about positive and negative. So here, oh, why did it do that? Here, no, I've gone, sorry. Here, you can see that light is used in the first sentence. It's clearly important. Do you think here that light is a positive thing or a negative thing? I mean, generally light is a positive thing, isn't it? Generally light is something that some people associate with religion. Let there be light. Also people, when they feel down, they say they're in a dark place or they feel dark. So therefore light often is, a positive thing. So in this instance, light is being used in a positive way, and I'm going to show you later on how that continues in the poem. Okay, so here I want you to look at the fifth quatrain, which is this one. Where is the metaphor that suggests the poet is hoping for a less divided world? Have a look here. See it? Right, hopefully you can see here the sun shines through their borderlines. So she's talking about maps, and she's talking about how maps have been divided, the world has been divided up. And she's saying here that the sun shines through their borderlines. And I think this is a sort of metaphorical message to us. We know that sun and light is being seen as a positive thing. And if the sun shines through the borderlines, maybe this is a suggestion that we shouldn't be so divided. Let the sun shine through where we're divided. So I think that's one of her clear messages in the poem. If we look at this stanza, how does Darker represent capitalism and our reliance for material goods? What is she saying about our reliance on these things? Fine slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. What's she saying? It's almost as if the paper is dictating our lives a little bit, isn't it? They fly our lives like paper kites. But also, they're just slips. And they fly, and they're paper kites, then they're fragile. And it's almost as if, this thing called money is actually quite fragile. It's not as important as we think. It's not the solid structure that we need in our lives. And if we are, all we're doing, all our aim in life is to get money, actually, it's a reminder that it's just paper. It's just fragile. And it's just a kite. It can fly in the air and it can fly away. And, I think that there is definitely a message here about us putting far too much importance on money and material things. Okay, these ones I'm going to leave you to work on yourself. Okay, and the last part of the poem. So looking at, keeps doing that, doesn't it? This one and this one. Look at quatrains 7 and 8. Look at what the speaker says daylight can break through. What do you think the speaker is criticising? Okay, here. Let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths. So let's just take capitals. What does a capital city represent in a country? Why do we have a capital city? So the capital city in any country is the capital for economic and monetary reasons. So it's where all the big businesses are, it's where all the money is made. And so I suppose you can say capital cities represent capitalism, therefore that's why they're called capitalism. So daylight can break through these, and they can also break through monoliths. And we talked about how it reminds us of Ozymandias because they are shapes that pride can make, statues. And now, if you think about it, this poem, is not written this year. But how we can link that to what is going on at the moment. There's been so much in the media about the statues that we have around the UK and the Black Lives Matter movement, looking at these statues and saying, actually, do you know what? Why do we actually want to be, looking up to these people when they've got really shady histories? And nobody is perfect, and I agree with that. But there is a lot of discussion about whether we should be looking up to these statues anymore. And actually, this is exactly what Darker is talking about here, these monoliths through the shapes that pride can make. Should we be holding value of these sort of big dramatic structures, these statues? And so I think she's criticising capitalism. I think she's criticising this idea of human power for not so good things. And she uses a lot of enjambment here, and I'm just looking at this bit here. If you look through, there's no full stops here. No full stops until we get to here, which is really interesting. So let's think about why she uses this enjambment. Why does she have the sentence going on to the next sentence without stopping? And I suppose we have to think about what her message is here, and she's saying, let the daylight break down, capitalism and statues and pride and all this kind of stuff. And actually, we should be valuing living tissue. Raise a structure never meant to last, of paper smoothed and stroked and thin to be transparent, turned into your skin. Then we have the full stop. So what is she saying here that we should be praising? What should we be looking up to? What should have power? And it should be us. We have power. We have living tissue. We are not meant to last. And it's interesting how at the end, and I'm going to get you to think about this yourself, she turns the pronoun into your skin, and she speaks directly to you. And I want you to think about what she's saying about power here, because is she saying that we should be sort of praising and looking up to one person, because she's changed that pronoun into your skin? So what's that saying about whoever is reading this poem? So I'll go back to the enjambment. I'll leave that thought with you. Go back to the enjambment. So why is she using enjambment here? She's asking us to build something, and it's building and building and building, and it's continuing, and it doesn't stop. Why does it stop here when she says turn to your skin? What is it about us? What happens to humans? Hopefully, after 100 years or so, we die. So that's the point where it stops. And it stops with us, and our own power stops with us when we die. Now, there's lots of other things for you to think about in this poem, and there are questions on this that you can go through in a little bit more detail, and you can annotate your copy. But what I will also put on there, and this is optional, I'm not going to say that you all have to do it, but if you want to kind of check, because it's quite a meaty poem, I suppose, Tissue, and it hasn't ever come up in the exam. So, it is one I feel you do need to know really well, because, the odds are that it's, really possible it could come up as a named poem. So you need to feel comfortable with it. So what I'm going to put on Show My Homework is this sheet, which has annotations on it that will help you to continue your annotations, and then a gap fill. So here are the words, and you just have to find the space there, and that's a really good just checking your understanding of the poem. Okay, so we're going to leave it there with Tissue today. I hope you feel at this point that you feel fairly confident that you know the messages that Darka was sharing with us with this poem. So I'm going to be putting out another video that I need you to watch, okay, because we have some information about you coming into school, and there's some stuff that you need to do before you come in for English. So I'm going to put a separate video out for that, so look out for that. And thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next time. Bye bye.